Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the opening session of the Travel Tech Theatre. My name is Shane Dallas, the Travel Camel, and we are talking about, to commence the 25th ATM here, we're talking about branding and selling in social media. We have Tom Otten, Managing Director, Create Media Group. When I was organising these sessions, he was one of the first people that came to my mind. He's very good at what he does, and you will learn a lot from him. And, I haven't even... Khalid Absi Halabi is travel lead of Facebook. So yes, not someone presenting to be Facebook. His card really is a Facebook, and he has a Facebook email. So he is coming here to talk about more the branding. Tom is talking about the selling. It is going to be a Q&A format, and I will... similar to an interview, and then if we have time at the end, we will take some questions. So this will be a very informative session, and the main point of organising these sessions, and I was explaining it to our speakers here, is to really give you the knowledge. The people who come, this is my fifth year at ATM and my fourth year speaking, and what people always want on social media is that knowledge, the knowledge they can leave this room and take it and enact it immediately. And this is what we're hoping to give to you in the 3 sessions that I'm running. One here today, tomorrow on mastering your social media, and social media influencer partnerships on Tuesday afternoon. So let us start, and I'm going to start with Tom, who raced in here to get here on time. Could you please tell me what makes a travel brand stand out from its competitors?
Sure. Well, I think if we take a strategic look at branding,
Closer.
There we go.
Closer.
There we go. If we take a strategic look at brand, the platforms have changed a lot. The actual delivery has changed a lot. When we look at the different platforms we have available to us, the actual consumption of media has changed a huge amount. But if we take it back and look strategically at the actual strategic side of brand, that hasn't changed since day one. If for a brand to stand out, whether it be a travel brand or any other, you need to be bold. So the brand needs to be bold, it needs to be visible, and it needs to be consistent. There are many areas that we see, some of the brands that we're working with and others that we see in the market that are doing some correctly and others not. In order to stand out on social media channels, whichever channels that you choose to use, you need to understand those channels innately. So you need to be using people that are digital natives that really understand the depths of how deep you can go in delivery on certain platforms. If you look at, let's say, an Instagram, it's a very different psychological space to Facebook, and again to LinkedIn, and again to a Snapchat. So you need to really understand that, okay, once I've determined where I want to position my brand and who am I actually talking to. So once you've worked out exactly who the target market are, and then where they're consuming that information, consuming that content, you then need to be creating content that sits perfectly within their world. So for a brand to really stand out, if you've worked out who you're speaking to, you've connected with them on the platforms that they choose to use, you're being bold, so therefore you're making a different statement, you're being consistent, so that over time, you're being consistent, so over time you're hammering that same message over and over again, and you need to be visible. So you need to be putting out content across all the channels. One of the key issues that we find with many brands is they're not putting out enough content that's native to those individual channels. One of the worst issues that we see is copy and paste across channels. So it's, for example, spending a lot of money in production on a TVC, for example, and then trying to chop that down and think, okay, well, if we just chop it down and make it shorter, we can put that on Facebook and it'll work. There's a very different psychology to someone that's watching TV to somebody that's actually consuming on a mobile phone. The screen size, everything. I mean, Khaled will certainly correct me if I'm wrong here, but a recent stat that I've heard is that people are scrolling, on average, the entire height of the Statue of Liberty. They're scrolling on a daily basis. So if you're creating content that's going to be standing out from... You've got to remember, you're not just competing with other travel brands, you're competing with your sister's friend's cat, you're competing with university friends, you're competing with every piece of content that's coming into that newsfeed. So you need to work out, how are you making a statement that's different? How are you engaging with your target market that's different to the other people in your competitive set? And how are they actually delivering, and how are they consuming that content? Once you tick those boxes and you're making those statements natively within those channels, then you can start to stand apart from other brands that you're with.
Okay, just a question on that. You said keeping consistent. Does that mean you put exactly the same content on every social media platform, or is there a difference?
No, it's exactly not doing that. So what I'm saying is keeping consistent with the ethos of your brand, and this is where the changes are really happening now. If you take a step back, strategically, it needs to stay consistent. However, the changes need to be seen in the delivery. So it's the use of technology. It's a very, very different mindset, even from a Facebook Live to an Instagram Live to Snapchat engagement. People are consuming the content, there's different demographics there, but their psychology of consumption is different. So you need to be creating content that's specific to those channels. Now, some of the major barriers to that is under-resourcing. So whether that's internally or you're using agencies externally, it's under-resourcing, so you don't have the capacity to create content for every single channel to the extent that you want it to be. And there are only very, very few brands that are really engaging to that level. But those are the sort of the key areas.
Yeah, so just a question, does social media require a different approach to branding to normal traditional media channels? And if they do, what is the difference?
Sure, and I think sort of alluded to previously, can everybody, by the way, can everyone hear? Because it's super loud up here. Can everyone hear at the back? Yeah, kind of, a little bit. I'll be a little bit louder, sorry. So strategically, there has to be that consistency, but the changes are needed in the actual channel itself. So that's where the changes are. So traditionally, even with traditional PR, you think back in the day, go back 10 years. The same key elements that you want to focus on and those key messages, core messages that you want to communicate will remain the same. You go through the same process to work out your strategic brand strategy, but everything now happens, it's about execution, and it's about changing your mindset in terms of that execution. That's where the changes are, and that's where we're seeing big gaps between companies that are really winning on social media and companies that are not winning on social media. It's that gap between, okay, they've worked out exactly what they want to say and who they want to say it to, but they're just not getting it right when it actually comes down to the delivery on the mobile phone. To the extent we're going into some of the biggest pitches that we do as an agency, and we're actually pitching with a mobile phone. So that you go in there and say, that's our entire pitch right there, and then let's talk about it. Because that's the mindset that you have to have as both, whether you're an in-house or an external agency.
Well, that's interesting you mentioned mobile phone, because I'm going to ask you about how the mobile phone has shifted the behaviour of travellers. How do you see that from the perspective of Facebook and Instagram?
Thank you, Shane. Can everybody hear me? Hi.
Have to
Thank you,
shout.
guys. Yeah, I know. Thank you guys for making it as well. I realize we're the first session here, so it's exciting. So thank you for being here, and we're honored, obviously, to be on the panel with you guys. But that's exactly, I mean, everybody here has a mobile phone, right? I saw several people carrying their mobile phones, taking pictures as well. That behavior is really the massive shift, probably the biggest shift that we've had in the past several years of how people are using travel and their mobile phones for travel. And this shift has obviously changed the way we research for products, the way we research for destinations, the way we use the mobile phone on a constant basis to actually inform us and keep us aware of what's actually, and discovering new places to actually go to. To add to what Tom was saying earlier as well, there's 300 feet worth of content that people go through every day. So that's the height of the Statue of Liberty. So that means on the mobile phone, on a daily basis, people are spending a lot of time on their mobile phones. So being able to distinguish yourself as a brand is critical. Oh, there you go. Okay, so being able to distinguish yourself is critical as well, to really be able to stand out and speak to those individual customers. Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. Now, since I've got you and we're talking, and we thank for everyone who's still coming in, I don't think there's any... Does anyone have a spare seat next to them? Could you hold your hand up if you have a spare seat next to you? If you've got a spare seat, there's there's only 2 spots left. So, no, Tom, no, not on the stage. So there's 2 spare seats left. Very good. So if you wish to sit in one of them, then please sit. There's one here and there's one over here. Just a question, since we're talking about travellers, and I know a lot of people here, and it's really, as I said, a great opportunity here from someone from Facebook to kind of give their inside knowledge. How do you find travellers are using Facebook and Instagram, because it's one of the same, in the travel industry? Do people use Facebook and Instagram? Do they use it to inspire where they travel? Do they use it to share their travel memories, or do they do both?
So They certainly do both, but I'll take a step back as well. So again, with the step change that's happening on a mobile device, the way people are finding, discovering, planning their vacations, planning their trips, that's shifted dramatically. Now, the moment one of my friends, let's call her Christine, actually decides to post a picture of Sri Lanka, and I've never been to Sri Lanka before, all of a sudden that place becomes so much more reachable for me because I can see a friend who's actually been there and that obviously has changed the way people are using it. And I'll highlight that Facebook and Instagram learn first and foremost from you, from the customers who are actually using Facebook and Instagram, and that's the way we sort of tailor the products as well, so that they match the way people's behavior to that extent. The way people, what we're finding is people are using Facebook and Instagram a little bit differently. Facebook is largely used as a for travel specifically in terms of research, in terms of researching what a destination is going to have, what pages they're going to go visit, and potential hotels, potential areas that they're going to go to. In addition, starting a lot of conversation, asking their friends, "What do you guys recommend when I go to Thailand? Which hotel should I go to? If I go to which restaurant should I go visit?" Instagram is used in a few different ways. Obviously, inspiring travel. That's sort of the number one key one that's there. But also getting travel tips, getting travel excitement, if you want, and tips that are happening on Instagram. The biggest one that I found a bit surprising was uncovering gems. So this is how do you find unique places, unique locations within a certain place or a certain area or a certain even restaurant that wouldn't have been, that you can now uncover. So people oftentimes, and my wife does this, I didn't even know about this until I went with her. She actually goes on Instagram to research where to take a picture in a specific location. Because Instagram is going to find out for that specific location and gives us that insight of where to go. And I thought that was interesting as well for that as well. So certainly there's the use case for Facebook and Instagram are certainly used across both inspiring and researching, planning a trip as well.
That's interesting because I think Facebook, amongst all the social media platforms, has something quite unique. Not only is it the biggest, I mean, it's twice as big as anyone else, but they call it the mum and dad test. Which social media platform are your parents going to be on? And I guarantee it's Facebook. And it's not going to be much else. Most people join Facebook to connect with family and friends. That's the main reason. That's why my mum's on it. Okay, she wants to see what I'm doing. She wants to see what her granddaughter's doing. Okay, that's why she's on it. Where most people on every other social media platform, they connect not to connect with family and friends. They use it to connect with people of like mind. Now, what's interesting about Facebook is that basically every person who's a family and friend is an influencer. And this is what makes Facebook quite unique, is that we are all influencers. You want to comment on this? We are all influencers to our family and friends. So we ask the recommendations to the hotels to stay or the restaurant to eat, and this is what we do. And what Facebook does is people trust family and friends above everything. You trust someone you know above anything. There's all the credible research shows that. And what Facebook does is put you in contact with family and friends who then, because you know them personally, that recommendation carries so much more weight. And this is the unique position amongst all social media platforms that Facebook has, and I know Tom wants to say something. So, do you want to comment on that?
I was just going to, alluding to the fact that you mentioned the influencers there, and look, the influencer market's going to grow 5 times by 2020 from where it is now. There with brands that we work with, there are mixed feelings with the use of influencers. It's very easy to point at some negative uses or sometimes that hasn't quite worked out for a brand. However, if done properly and if researched properly and using the right influencer, it can have a profound impact on a brand and its visibility. What you were alluding to there with regards to connecting family and friends and everybody becoming an influencer, it's exponentially grown the power of almost word of mouth marketing, which hasn't changed. It's just we now have the technology in our pocket to connect with the family and friends and get that information from them. But then also, if you look at very much so the Gen Z, are really putting a lot of onus on what certain influencers say. I mean, you look at some of the younger generation. When they grow up, they want to grow up to be YouTube stars. Now they're watching these guys on YouTube and on all social channels, including Facebook, and they're buying into their views. So when you start to see sort of the growth of some of these influencers in the tens of millions, huge visibility, they can have a huge, profound impact on a brand financially. So it's been interesting to see how that's grown. And like I said, if it's used consistently and effectively by a brand, it can have a very strong impact.
Did you want to add to that?
No, absolutely. I mean, I think that fully resonates. Your circle of influence, as you alluded to as well. So if your circle of influence could be 3 people, I trust my family first and foremost to recommend places. And if I can use them as my immediate circle of influence, then certainly that's going to be a big change. And to Tom's point as well is how can you leverage those influencers to also drive a bigger message as well to fit your brand that you want to achieve.
And it comes down to an element of trust. And I think it's very easy I'm assuming many of the people in the room here are looking after brands in one way or another. You're engaged on social media channels for your brand. Now, it's like I said, it's very easy to point at influencers and say, point to negative situations. However, a lot of the onus does remain on the side of the brand custodian, so that's yourselves, to do the due diligence, to work out exactly who the right people are, who the right fit is for your particular brand. There's been a larger movement away from some of the macro influencers to more of the micro influencers, and the reason for that is a closer brand alignment and more trust. So if you're trying to speak to a certain demographic within a certain space, let's say a certain country, doing the research, working out what they've posted in the past, what brands they've worked with in the past, and actually nailing down, okay, these are the 5 best people that we can find online, rather than just going for somebody with a large following and then wondering why it didn't really work out. So it works from both parties.
Yeah, the final session I'm moderating here on Tuesday is about successful social media partnerships. And what's very interesting, influencer partnerships. And the 2 biggest complaints I hear from travel brands working with influencers was, 1, how do they measure ROI? And we'll be looking at that on Tuesday. And the second one is, I chose the wrong person. And people get blinded by numbers, and it's better to have a more engaged audience with less followers than a massive audience where no one follows you. I mean, it's much better. So the micro influencers, and I know out there on the floor, speaking to people last year, I had more and more people talking to me about the importance of micro influencers. And what you said about trust, I always say that social media, establishing a presence, is about authority. Establishing authority, if you're an authority, you become trusted. And trust and authority are the 2 keys when you're on social media. And so I do echo what you're saying.
Just one thing on authority. The only way that you can have an authoritative voice on social media is by actually putting content out. And again, that's one of the things that we see from an influencer side, from a brand side, whether that be travel or anybody, is a lack of high quality content. Even if they have the ability, let's say we work with a brand and we need to speak to, let's say, the 6 key stakeholders within the brand that have a real authoritative voice on their certain area of business. It's about pulling them out of the business. So within your businesses, it's about looking into, okay, who are the 5 or 6 key people within our business. And that doesn't necessarily mean senior management. It can be anyone within the business that knows exactly what they're talking about in that certain space. So social is about pulling those people out and actually creating content around them, whether that's putting them on an Instagram or a Facebook Live. It's about creating short, let's say 1-minute videos, where it's about getting them to write blog posts once a month. If you pull these influencers out within your business, then you're able to have an authoritative voice, because as people are consuming that content, they see, that's the 3rd or 4th or 5th person I've seen coming from this brand or this business that really knows exactly what they're talking about. And over time, that's how you build up a brand on social media.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people, it's easy to say you're an influencer, and
Attention to all visitors. Future travel experiences is starting at 1:30 sharp at the global stage. Thank you.
Okay, so you can go to global stage if you want, but I'd really love it if you stayed here. What I was going to say is there's a lot of people out there, especially in the MENA region, that claim they're influencers and they're not. And it's one of the big things I know, speaking to a lot of people and PR companies in Dubai, a lot of people say they're influencers and they're really not influencers. It's easy to use the label. And one of the things that really shows it is the quality of their content and the way they approach you.
Attention to all visitors. Future travel experience is starting at 1:30 sharp at the global stage. Thank you.
Okay, we might have to do something about those announcements, or it's going to make life in the Travel Tech Theatre hard for everyone the next 3 days. Now, I'm going to ask what I think is probably the most important question, and Tom, you can answer it as well, but I need to ask you first, Khalid. User-generated content. We talk about content of family and friends. it is so important in many travel markets, especially emerging travel markets. How can travel brands use that user-generated content and how they can encourage it on Facebook and Instagram?
It's a great question. I think there's a couple of things that can be done. Ultimately, your users and the people that advocate your products are going to be the people who use your products are going to be your strongest advocates. So if they use your products, are able to share it and get their next friend or family member or whoever else to start using that product, that's by far going to be the biggest win for everybody, for you, your friend, and ultimately the brand that's going to be selling it. There's a couple of things that can be done. Ultimately, the product has to be ready for that type of experience. If someone can share, if you want that ability, that photo of their food or that place that they wanna, they take a picture in front of a monument of some sort. One thing that Tourism Australia did that was actually kind of interesting was they started the hashtag Food Australia Food, I believe, or Food Australia, the other way around. And they got millions and millions of people to actually share their food in Australia and to create a food destination out of Australia. And they would actually use that as a platform for other people around the world to find out a little bit more about food tourism as well in Australia. Obviously, the local example here is My Dubai and hashtag My Dubai, and the way people leverage and Dubai Tourism uses that content if you want to speak their story and tell it across the globe as well. In addition, there's a lot of, in the absence of this as well, there's a lot of partners that also do this as well. So partners offer the ability, if you want, to source user-generated content and to find the relevant influencers and be able to give them to you as a brand to start creating that content for you. That content, going back to the earlier point, for it to be thumb-stopping, if you want, for it so that people can, as they're browsing through Facebook or Instagram, for them to stop and look at your brand, giving you even a couple of seconds of attention, it has to be very natural. It has to compete with their friends, their family's posts. And for it to be the case, it has to be as natural, as relatable as possible to those individuals. And that's why user-generated content is extremely important, if you want, in this case.
Tom?
Look, the way I see it, look, user-generated content is a hack. What you're trying to do as a brand is you're trying to communicate your key proposition, your key messaging. Now, as we all know, we see something that comes from a brand and we think advertising we're being sold to. So the major use of user-generated content is the same reason why something like TripAdvisor has done so well over the years. People believe in what other people have to say about it when they're not incentivized to say it. So a brand, somebody sees something coming specifically from the brand, they know that it's in their interest to say X, Y, and Z, which, if you're thinking about it negatively, might not be the entire truth because they're trying to sell something. But if it comes from people that don't have any sort of financial incentive in order to say that, then it carries a lot more weight. It goes back to word of mouth marketing. It goes back to trust. The same things we spoke about earlier. The use of user-generated content in this space, I think it's exponentially more important than in most other industries. People want to be sold to. They want to see that that inspiring travel post. They want to be inspired to travel. We know that 80% of decisions are made emotionally. I'd say that when it comes to travel, even more so than that. Now there's some stats, and I don't know the specific numbers of this, but they're talking about Generation Z booking holidays and booking destinations because they're thinking about the content that they're going to be able to create there to put on their own social channels. That's how important it is, that they know that if they go to a specific location, the photos they're going to be able to take are going to look great on their Instagram account. And that's a real thing these days. So how do brands actually hack that? And bring that into a space where it's able to be used to sort of to position them, and that's through bringing in things like systems like Tint, for example. So bringing in tint walls into your hotels, into your sites, your locations, and actually sort of showcasing content that's pulled through from a hashtag. It's about engaging with your consumers that are part of your following and giving them incentives in order to post X, Y, and Z using a specific hashtag. I mean, My Dubai is a great example of that. that, and I think we'll get onto that a little bit later. But if you're a brand and you're looking for your consumers or your customers to actually sort of showcase your product on your behalf, then incentivize them in one way or another. It could be upgrades, it could be a number of sort of opportunities that you have within your product portfolio, but to drive them to actually post that content and give them visibility. Often all they want is visibility. That's what My Dubai is, right? Everyone's kind of trying to post the perfect picture so they can get that visibility and it to be reposted. It could be something as simple as that actually drives more content. And if you're increasing by 20, 30, 40% the number of people that are actually posting, utilizing your hashtag and doing your sales job and your certainly your brand job for you, you're onto a winner. It's half your job done.
And speaking of hashtags, you see the hashtag up there, ATM Dubai. So you can use it on Instagram and Twitter, of course, at the Travel Camels Meet. Jade, thank you very much. Jade's out there and posted a photo on Twitter. There you are, and I've retweeted it already because tagged me and used the ATM hashtag. But it's interesting that you mention that. So thank you, Jade. It's interesting you should mention that because one of the people we have on Tuesday session, Ferry Trinidad from the Rotana, talks about how he would run competitions. And so they would have an Instagram competition, have an Insta wall, and so it would be a wall, and it would have actually the Fly Dubai stand saying they have a social media wall this year, and I'm yet to check it out, where it is when you mention them, and people like seeing their faces appear on TV, and they like seeing the hashtag. And of course, the incentive for that is not just to appear. The best photo would win a dinner for two, or at the restaurant they're at. And so this encourages content, and they use the content on this wall, and you can see people. I've sat in the hotel, and they look and they see them, and they point and they recognise it's something they relate to. So there are ways that you can encourage this content, and it is a very important area because you think of it like this, and I'll give it back to you. You think of it like this: these are people who are paying you to eat and to stay, and through them you can get publicity. So it's a great deal, really, isn't it? So you were going to say something. No, you weren't? Okay, then. So it's something that you can use, and you'll hear more about that on Tuesday sessions. I'm going to speak to you, Tom, because I know that you've done some really impressive campaigns, and I'd like you to explain, because practical examples are always very useful, an example of a successful branding campaign using social media. What is one that you're particularly proud of at Create Media?
Look, there's a few things that we've worked on now. I'm going to allude to a couple of different projects, some that we worked on and some that are just globally known. But one of the things that we work closely with Red Bull, and it's driving large-scale events. So working in the space of the Red Bull Air Race, Cliff Diving World Championships, and the like. And in terms of success on social media, it was about, for us, Red Bull's not trying to sell a product through social media. It's all about brand. It's all about getting the tonality right, getting the visibility right, getting the reach and the engagement. So it's all focused on brand on social rather than actually selling the cans or selling any of their products. So something that we did with them is sort of take a step back and look at it holistically across all the different sort of social channels. And I'm going to talk from quite a nuts and bolts activation perspective here. Is that how do we actually and this could be, in another case, this could be a hotel opening, for example. It could be any large event that you have in your industry. But with this, we approached it and we sat back and we said, okay, well, a full messaging matrix was written across the wall. These are the core messages that we need to communicate. This is the everything from more of a tactical. This is more sort of top-line brand. This is what we needed to pull in from international. This is what was coming from the local market. And then we mapped that against all the different social channels, and we said, right, this is where this message is going to sit. This is where this message is going to sit. And then we mapped out another matrix, specifically where each message had to sit on that social channel, and then from there mapped it down to how we actually going to engage in that social channel to actually communicate that message. So let's say we had somebody on doing a global live story on Snapchat. So that's one person that sits and we work out, okay, what messaging we're going to put out. Let's say we've got, we're going to put out 15 different snaps that are going to go out on this global story. The 15 pieces of content, what messaging are we going to have, where are we going to start? Okay, you're going to get in a car, you're going to go from here to here. So that's the level that you need to get to do it correctly. So when you look at some of these global brands and you see how they're engaging their content on social channels, it's because they've actually sat down and pre-planned it. And they've pre-planned it to the extent where they've actually got people that know exactly what they're doing on those social channels, looking after the individual channel. So from my side, I mean, the lesson there, I think, for many brands, and we're constantly drumming sort of beating the drum on this, it's not about the agency just trying to drive up revenues and try and drive up resource. This is whether you have this in-house and you do this within your team, or you do this when you pull an agency in. It requires a lot to do things properly. It's easy to shoot some content and just blast it out across all the social channels, but if you're going to really drill down into the nuts and bolts of getting a strategy right, it starts from the strategic perspective, and then really bring it down into a nuts and bolts and have people that are digital natives in that space. Moving on, I mean, when we talk about something a bit more closely aligned with the travel industry and talking about user-generated content, which is just so important in this industry, My Dubai have done an incredible job with that. And how they've been able to start from so small, but also using an influencer to start this. So this was started under Sheikh Hamdan. So that gave it credibility, it gave it authority from day one, and people wanted to engage with him and therefore his initiatives. It started from that and it's grown from there, and it's become its own entire project, but still hugely successful. I know the team that work on that. We've done some work in the past in the early days with streaming that through to screens that were then that were around the Dubai fountains. That goes back to the visibility. So not even just on social media channels, we were actually pulling that content through from the hashtag, and we were broadcasting it on the large TV screen at the bottom of the Burj Khalifa overlooking the fountains, because we knew that tens of thousands of people were there every single day, and they'd start to engage, and as you said earlier, they start to see their own picture. So when someone gets, I mean, I even know through my friends we work in media, if one of us actually gets a photo reposted on My Dubai, everybody's like sharing it. Hey, check it out! Like, it's a cool thing. People love that, and that's often, it goes back from a hotel perspective, or right the way through to a huge government buy perspective. If you're giving the influencers or micro influencers that level of visibility, it will just keep on driving engagement. The third thing as well with regards to actually engaging, it's not. You can't just talk at your community, and I know this sounds a little bit cliche, and you'll definitely heard this before, but still, time and time again, as an agency, we don't see enough brands really taking social listening seriously. I know some friends from Marriott are in the room. I know that they're doing, I mean, really investing in that space, and you're really going to see what they're going to do over the next couple of years as their systems really start to sort of take hold in terms of their day-to-day content. But every brand should be doing this. I mean, when I was last down at Dubai Tourism, down at DTCM, they took us into their social listening room, and it looks like a control center in some sort of, I don't know, like
a spaceship.
Some spaceship, like security, like something you'd expect to see on some sort of security council somewhere. It's literally a horseshoe with different people from all different nationalities sat around this table, and just a bank of screens with every social channel, every hashtag, every language, all being pulled through into it, and they're literally sat there in real time, and they're just watching what's going on, and they're like, right, we need to react to this one, right, we need to react to that. That's obviously at a government level and a huge amount of resources, but there are certain brands that are really investing in a similar space, and with today's technology, there are products that we can all buy off the shelf if you're willing to invest, but don't just invest in the technology. Make sure you've got people that actually know how to run it and how to listen. It's all great buying a Mercedes, but if you don't know how to drive, it's not going to get you very far. That's often what we see as well. So it's having the people that are dedicated just to listening, using these tools to then be able to say, right, this is how it's going to mold our social strategy. This is how we're going to react to an influencer that's just popped up with 500,000 followers, and they've just said X, Y, and Z about our brand. Like, if you've pre-planned all of this, it's very easy to then react to it. And as you build upon that, as I said, brands like Marriott, brands such as My Dubai and Red Bull even, once you've built that kind of media house, that media hub, you really have the opportunity to stand apart, going back to your first question, to really stand apart on social media. So don't be creepy with it, but listen to what the community is saying and react and respond accordingly.
Excellent answer. Yeah, I have to say, Dubai Tourism, their social media program is phenomenal. I've never seen anything like it anywhere in the world. It is very impressive. But one thing about when you're looking for brands that come up, and I say this because I do social media training, and I say this to people, who do you engage with when you see it online? Check their account, because they may have a lot of followers, but they may be putting out messages there you don't want to associate with. So just be careful. If you see a message go up, check. You know, are they pushing some political ideal you don't agree with? Is there various other messages you don't want to be associated with? So just have a look at the account. It's going to be apparent very quickly what happens. Now, just another thing, you've heard of EasyJet, which is UK. In Africa, they have FastJet. And it was interesting, I was speaking to someone about this morning, is that they had a campaign in their in-flight magazine, and it was the best Instagram photo of the month will win a $100 voucher for FastJet. And if you use the hashtag. Now, this is interesting. So they were taking the online, offline. And how many people do you think are using that hashtag to win that $100? I guarantee it's a lot, and I guarantee the return on investment on that is very high because it's not costing them a lot, yet people are using it. Which now brings me, return on investment, to another important question. It's about Facebook ads. Now, I know if Facebook ads are used correctly, they do very well. Now, the example we were talking about before, Western Grand Cayman in the Caribbean, and there's a chap there called Mark, who's the marketing manager, filmed his own ad, spent less than, so it took 3 days to do a video, spent less than $1,000 on Facebook ads and generated in room sales alone $40,000 US. That excludes food and beverage, excludes spa services. And that's just from one, just correct, a very good video. It wasn't super professional. It's not the perfect video. It doesn't have all this music going across the top or sweeping panoramas or drone shots. It is just a bird's-eye person walking through the resort, eating the meal, looking at the alarm clock, putting the coffee on in the morning, going into the bar. It's a very simple, and yet they generated 40,000. So Facebook ads, when used correctly, are very powerful. When not used correctly, of course, like everything, if you don't use it correctly, it's not powerful. So what can you do to maximize your ROI when using Facebook ads?
Thank you. So let me ask you a question. If you, by show of hands, who came from out of Dubai to come here? Okay, cool. Quite a few people. Did you guys know that you had approximately 8.6 million choices before you actually came here, between which airlines you're going to take, which hotels you're going to choose from, which rooms within the hotels you're going to choose from. 8.6 million choices. That means every single one of those choices is competing for your time and your attention as well. So that's pretty crazy. And if you think about it, on Facebook, there's 2 billion people using Facebook, 800 million on Instagram, 500 million people on Instagram on a daily basis. Not all of them are going to be relevant to you at a certain time frame. So you want to make sure that you're able to identify the right people, the right individuals, and speak to them a little bit differently in a language that actually starts making more sense. If you're an airline and you want to speak to a mother who wants to make sure that her child gets really taken care of on the flight, so she can just unwind and relax on the flight and doesn't necessarily have to worry about the stress of traveling with a child. And the same way, if you're a businesswoman, your interests and what you want, how you want to be spoken to, what the messages you want to be communicated to, is going to be largely very, very different. So Facebook and Instagram advertising specifically are people-based platforms. It's based on the way you as a customer, as a client, would understand those customers, segment those audiences, and be able to target them based on what message you want to communicate to them and what brand offering you can actually provide for them. And the way you can do that, you can obviously target people based on their demographics, based on their interests, based on their behavior, and you can also start targeting based on your own customer data as well. So you can speak to them again, encourage them to come back and book with you and travel with you. Now, to your specific question on ROI, once you're able to segment that audience, again, you're competing for choice and you're competing amongst 300 feet worth of content. So the content is also extremely important. But you're serving always one of two objectives. One is related to branding, and we spoke about this quite at length already. And the other one's related to direct selling. So the direct selling piece is how do you make sure you're targeting someone at the moment when you know that they're about to travel. You know that they're going to go to, for example, New York, and you're able to offer them that offering at that exact time frame that you want. And that's where the real science comes in, and that's where the real ROI behind it comes in. So the toughest part is once you're able is to segment those audiences. So you have a certain audience that you want to reach, you want to change their mind, you want to get them to know what your brand is about. But then when it actually comes, push comes to shove, when they're actually about to travel, how are you able to influence them to actually drive them to book with you, or drive them to fly with you, or use your product that you're going to be using?
Could you just explain? I know, Tom, you're wanting to jump in here. You talk about segment your audiences. Could you explain a bit more what that concept is?
Absolutely. I mean, one of the key things that really stands out online is you get a lot of data on how your customers are actually using your products, right? So you can actually start identifying different behaviors, different demographics, different users as well. And segmenting your audience is important because when you're speaking to them, you want to speak to them in the language that is gonna relate to them. And the example going earlier is whether it's a mother or a father, or whether it's a business travel, or whether it's a adventure travel, or whether it's you're providing hiking tours, or you're providing shopping destination. Each one of the customers and the way they're going to be using that data is going to be very, very different from the next one. So segmenting your audiences is very crucial in order to give them and relate the right message, and ultimately provide them with the right product as well.
Very good, Tom.
Yeah, sure. I mean, in this day and age, all of this process starts from really understanding your data, and certainly in this market, it's an area that's lacking. So we're working with some really big brands and really trying to drill in and draw as much insight out of this data as possible. All of it starts from this point, and then going into the segmentation, and then looking at how you're communicating with them. And that could be sending through your email campaigns, that could be through your Facebook ads, it could be any of these channels. Now, one of the issues we face is firstly not really understanding that data. But once you do get past that first hurdle and you've really drilled down, look, all of us right now, if you've engaged with a brand before, if you've purchased from a brand, you don't want that brand a few weeks later talking to you as if it doesn't know you. You don't want that brand communicating with you like you've never spent money with them before. And in this industry, you've probably spent quite a lot of money with them. And that's the issue. If you've stayed at your hotels, if you've traveled with your airlines, the consumers probably spent a considerable amount of money. Now, to then not understand that, to not engage in a way that you recognize as a brand, thank you very much for spending your hard-earned money with us, and this is how we're going to communicate with you differently. So, in terms of the nuts and bolts, I mean, one of the things that we've seen, which is it's basic, but still so many brands are not doing this, is taking your first-party data and uploading that to Facebook, uploading the email addresses you have, and creating those custom audiences. Now you can segment that as much as you want. It's a custom audience that has engaged with you and purchased with you. That's the most generic. But then you can break that down and say it's a community that's engaged, that's purchased with us in the last 3 months, the last 6 months, that has purchased this product, has purchased that product. When you start to break all of that down, you can then communicate to each of those communities, each of those groups, in a very specific way. Now, as you well know, you're going to engage with something that's been personally spoken and crafted for you, whether that's the creative, whether that's the copy, whatever it might be. So if you drill into your data and you really understand that segmentation, then you use that to run your Facebook ads, you'll see a much higher return on investment. If you don't have that data, yes, you can break down, and Facebook has, and Facebook/Instagram has some incredible has the incredible ability to target, because we've all just given so much data to these platforms over the years. Everything that you've liked, everything you've engaged with. Obviously, Facebook knows this and is therefore able to shape certain target groups that you can then speak to. That's one way to do it. But there's in our experience as an agency, nothing will beat uploading first-party data, people that you know have engaged with your brand or your product, and then communicating with them. What you can then do, which some may or may not know, is then build lookalike audiences outside of that. So if you've got an email list of 10,000 people that you upload, and let's say 7,000 or 8,000 of them are using the same email address for the communication that you've received from them, and also for their Facebook, there's always a bit of a drop off there. But once you have that, you've created that custom audience and you're communicating to them, you can then say, I want another 5,000 or another 10,000 people that look a lot like the people that I've already uploaded and given you this data of. Facebook then has the ability to do that. So we're seeing huge results and huge return on investment when we're actually engaging to that level.
I just want to say, Tom, that you might as well work for Facebook. You know it so well. Well done. Now that actually, Tom raised a few points that I failed to mention as well, and I think that's fantastic. The way segmenting it on that point specifically is we talk to your existing customers, and that's really important. And then you want to talk to the individuals who are very likely shopping for customers, for you to be a customer. So you have one segment is your customers, and then people who are very likely to be customers, And then you have everybody else who you want to eventually, maybe not today, but maybe next year or in a couple of months, you want them to become your customers. And I think to Tom's point, retargeting and capturing that data that your customers are giving to be able to speak to them differently is extremely important. But then also leveraging that data and excluding them from the audiences you're going to target. And you want to acquire new customers who are going to be potentially in that pool that's going to constantly feed that engine, that growth engine that you have for you as well. So.
Tom, you've got to jump off. So while we're at it, because you mentioned in there about things that you shouldn't do, so you have to be careful. So I'd like you to expand on the common branding mistakes people may make on social media. So just to talk briefly about that.
Sure. I mean, the key thing we see, well, there's two sides to this. One is lack of consistency. Talking in one way on one channel and talking in a different way on the other channel. Now, I caveat by the fact that, yes, you do need to communicate in different ways, but it still has to have the ethos of your brand. So it's maintaining consistency in terms of brand messaging, but just the tactical, actual engagement needs to be slightly different. The other thing, like I said, it often comes back to a lack of resourcing. So I do feel for the brands as well, because I know all of us have limitations when it comes to the resources that we have. We don't have enough people in our we don't have enough people in our team. We don't have enough budget to pay the agency, whatever it might be. But the biggest issue is one of the things we see is we're still in this transition phase from traditional to more digital. So there's still some brands that are spending a lot more money on, let's say, the big TVC that's going to sit on TV channels. But I mean, as a digital agency, like we really see this channel is rapidly declining, if not on its way out, if not dead. That if you take that sort of money, that big budget, and actually place that into smaller budget production in terms of creating good quality video content for a fraction of the cost. But I go back to the targeting of groups. If you break out, if you were going to go and create one TVC and it was going to cost you X, if you can break that same budget down and say, right, well, with X budget, I'm going to break that down into 4 or 5 shorter, small videos that are going to be shot on the fly, that don't have to be, as you said earlier, the most perfectly executed, glossy, shiny, cinematographic cameras, etc., etc. It can be a bit more on the fly. If you take that same budget and you break it down, but you create each of those 4 or 5 videos to speak to a specific target audience, because you've already done your data analysis, you already understand your target markets, you already know who you need to speak to. The problem is, if you create one big brand campaign video, who are you speaking to? Everybody? Like, you need to break it down into this community, this community, this community, those that have purchased with you, those from a different nationality, whatever that breakdown is, and then create content for that. So one of the biggest issues is, like I said, is blanketing the same content across everything and not really understanding the platforms and therefore the community. I mean, you said earlier that, I mean, Facebook has aged up just because of its age itself. So yes, our parents and maybe even grandparents are on there because they want to connect with their family. A Snapchat audience is very, very different. An Instagram audience is also very, very different. So it's also, it's some events we've been to, and we'd be thinking, okay, Facebook, Instagram, because it's the biggest. And then we think, oh, hold on a second, let's actually drill into who the speakers are. Let's drill into who the actual attendees are, and we realize that actually this event needs to be focused completely on Twitter, just because that's the nature of. Maybe it was. I mean, the one I'm alluding to is specifically it was an educational platform, and we found that the majority of people that wanted to engage were sat on Twitter. So you just need to understand who's on each of those channels and not try and blanket across everything.
I'll add as well. I mean, on the mistakes that brands make. I work with a lot of the travel brands as well. The biggest challenge that I see is going back to what you said as well, is about the content. I mean, let me know if anybody has fallen to this trap. When you post something on Facebook or Instagram, particularly the airlines, they might put a picture of an airplane, or they might put a picture of a very generic stock photo of like a destination that they're going to travel to. And everybody does the exact same thing. If all the brands end up doing the exact same thing, how are you going to stand out? How do you actually create that thing? And all of my clients fall victim to this, by the way. So this is part of my education process of what we can actually do differently. The easiest way that you as marketeers or whoever's interested in these things, the easiest way is whenever you're posting something, make sure to test it. Hold it on a mobile phone and look at it yourself. If it's going to attract your attention, if you're going to be able to see it, understand it fully, and be able to stop for a second and be able to, you know what, I'm going to give my attention for this. That's actually the easiest hack if you want to really see if that's going to resonate with others as well.
One of the things that I always say to people when I do training is don't find your niche. Don't say it's adventure travel or luxury or environmental. Find your voice. Tell the story that only you can tell. The unique selling proposition. You've got to find the story that only you can tell, the content that only you can share, the content that makes it very specific to you on social media. And it's very important. Don't try to do what everyone else is doing. It might get you inspiration, but don't copy. Don't copy. Find your own voice. Find your own voice when you're on social media. Now, I had more questions, but we could be here for 2 hours. But I'd like to take a couple of questions from the audience. If people have got the mic wandering around, yeah, there's a mic at the back. So if you have a question in the last 10 minutes we have here, could you raise your hand, please, if you would like to ask a question of one of our learned panelists. If there's no takers, and I'll continue on this gentleman down here. Thank you.
Hi. My name is Richard from TravelWings.com OTA. In the UAE alone, we have around, and I'm being conservative here, but around 40 to 50 OTAs, all gunning for the same market. Now, I understand that segmentation is critical, finding your own voice and communication is important, but there's limitations. There's only so much that you can segment. There's only so much that you can communicate differently. Ultimately, the product that you're selling, if we look at flights, for example, it's the same product. There's no augmented product on a flight unless you're booking a business class ticket. So my question is, to what extent can you differentiate your product, and what would you suggest we do in order to be different to the 40 other OTAs that are, trying to claim that same market? The UAE's population is really, really small, so, and even less the people that are traveling out of the UAE on a consistent basis.
An excellent question. How do you differentiate your product, even though there is a lot of competition offering very much the same out there? Who would like to answer that?
I can take a stab at it. I mean, differentiation is it's a great question. It's ultimately the same product, but people are going to be using their product probably a little bit differently. And I think you mentioned airlines. I don't know if that's your area that you're focusing on, but airlines is a perfect example. Everybody's going to travel for a separate reason. Everybody has their own usage, and everybody has their own expectations as well out of their product. At the end of the day, we're all people. We're not units that are being sold, right? So these understanding the people and being able to communicate them in something that matters to them is much more powerful than even though it's the same product. But what I care about is going to be very different than what Tom's going to care about. It's going to be very different than what a father and mother are going to care about who are traveling with a family of 2 or 3 people. Very different than what honeymooners are going to care about as well, right? It's ultimately the same seat, right? For you as an airline, it's going to be the same seat, but the way we're going to speak to those individuals is going to incentivize the different reactions, if you want, from each and every one of those individuals as well.
To just jump in on that, it's also, I mean, if we look at why did you buy the shoes that you're wearing? They're pretty much similar to many other brands, and this is where brand comes in versus selling. So not necessarily being tactical, because then you get into a price war and you're constantly having the same battle. But this is where the reason people purchase. I mean, 80% of purchase decisions being emotional is the strength of brand and how you differentiate your brand, not necessarily the product, is where you find the differentiator. The other side to that as well is taking advantage of new technology, new ways of communicating. So one of the things that we were just speaking briefly off microphone then was about, let's say, live content, live video. So there are constantly new ways of communicating with your consumers that brands are always slow, and this is where your opportunity is. Brands are always slow to catch up because they don't really know how to use the tech. They don't have, let's say, in-house or even an agency that knows what they're doing with it. So it's, let's say, live video is a perfect example. If you then leverage that because more people are engaging with it because it's still fairly new, it's still like not really being engaged with too much with brands consistently. So if that's an opportunity, so live is an example, but what's next? What's coming next? So it's a new platform, it's a new communication style. So once you have this mindset of being ahead of the game in comparison to your competitors, you're already differentiating with brand and your channel.
Excellent answers. One final question from the audience. There's someone here. Here we go. Seems to be this side of the audience is most interested to ask questions. Thank you very much.
Hi, I am Marilyn from Shangri-La Hotels. I have a question regarding the general data protection regulation that is going to be in place for EU residents and how this will be affecting the targeting of our audiences on social media and the uploading of our first-party data.
Okay, data protection, and I think GDPR is what you were alluding to there in the EU.
Yep.
So
Thank you for the question.
talking about, since Facebook's been in the news with regards to data, I'm going to pass that one across to you.
I'd rather we because I'm not an expert in this, so I'd rather we take it offline. I'll lead you to the right resources for this. It's obviously we take data extremely seriously in light of obviously whether it's since we started, but especially in the last couple of weeks. I think it's extremely important everybody knows that we obviously value everybody, and Facebook is built on trust as well, right? We want to regain and we want to rebuild that trust as well. To your point specifically, I'll have to lead you in the right direction after the session as well.
Just as a more supportive note to Facebook as well. I mean, I spent quite a lot of time watching watching what was happening over in the US with regards to Mark Zuckerberg's sort of appearance in front of the Senate and the House Committee, and also GDPR. We work with, as I said, so both here and in London, we're working with brands that are controlling consumer data within Europe, and GDPR is going to have a very big effect on that. We send out about 24 million emails a year for certain brands, and there's a lot that's going to come in that needs to change about sort of data portability and the like, and allowing the consumers to understand exactly what data you have on them. Now, Facebook, for example, although operating across in the US, a large part of its business, and globally, as they've come out and said that they're abiding by GDPR throughout the entire business, which is a huge step on their behalf, which was great to see them doing that. But outside of that, like I said, we do a lot of email communication, and I think it's the fines are big. Let's put it that way. Europe's going to come down hard on this, so the onus is on yourselves as brand custodians, as data custodians, to really understand the ins and outs. Now, to be perfectly honest with you, I did a course in London a few weeks back by a lawyer came in and was speaking specifically on GDPR, and she couldn't even answer a lot of the questions that we had that I'm sure that you would have as well about, okay, exactly this or this. Do I have to do A or B? And there's still a lot of grey area. And as with a lot of let's say new mandatory regulations that do come out in spaces such as this, it's not until it goes to court and precedents start to get set that we'll start to realize within this grey area where we all have to sit. So I mean, it was interesting for me the other day watching some of the Premiership football, and even Manchester United around the grounds were flashing up saying, if you're one of our followers, I mean different wording obviously, but if you're one of our followers, then please re-opt into our database, because they're just being super careful. So to see that being branded, I mean that's super expensive advertising space. So that for them to be using that, that's how seriously some of these brands are taking it. So like I said, I certainly don't have all the answers, and to be honest, the answers are not out there right now. But it's something as brand custodians and data custodians, you really have to spend as much time as possible and really just link into it, because as that news comes out, all of us as marketeers have to be updated.
And the thing with that is a lot of that is driven by the media, but the legal realities may be quite different. So what the media might be saying to you that this is legal, this is wrong, only the courts have that decision. I used to work for a government investigation agency in Australia, and in cases we used to work on, and people would say, "Oh, that's illegal." Actually, it's the courts that decide. It's not you as a journalist to decide that. So it is a very grey area, and I think you've answered that very well. And guess what? We are out of time, and I have to say, Khalid, thank you so much. Thank you, Tom. Thank you for entrusting me and coming on to this session. For the first session, I didn't know how many people came here. We were packed, standing room only. I thank you so much. My next session is here. It is at tomorrow o'clock at 2:45. We're talking mastering your social media, focusing on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Twitter. And we'll have 3 people from each, not from the actual brands, but people who use them and use them very well in this same room. So thank you for supporting this. I hope you enjoyed it, and look forward to seeing you again later at ATM, and have an excellent Arabian Travel Market 2018. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.